Welcome back to the Needlebook series and Happy New Year. This series is all about understanding our tools and building a needlebook that truly supports hand stitching, embroidery, visible mending, and other textile work we love to do. Today we're continuing our work on the needlebook by looking at the supplies you'll need for the entirety of the project, as well as a slick way to transfer your favorite font directly onto fabric and stitching your page labels. Our focus is on practical techniques, thoughtful maintenance of our needles, and building a lasting and practical sewing notion. I'm excited to get going. Let's dive in. The supplies you'll need. There are 9 in all you'll want to gather. They are wool felt, featherweight interfacing, also called fusible. This is the featherweight thickness, felted wool scraps, lanolin, DMC, a decorative button, elastic cordage, an old sheet or pillowcase, and, oddly enough, a roll of kitchen freezer paper. Okay, now I'm a big proponent of thrifting, recycling, and reuse, and you'll find these themes running through most everything I create. If you can't find some of these items or are unable or don't choose to buy them, that's perfectly okay. There are many ways to skin a cat, and any improvisations you dream up will make this book uniquely yours. Don't feel you must use what I've listed if you have other ideas. This video is merely what I've used to create this needlebook. I'd like to touch briefly on some points regarding some of the materials that I have here on the list. Let's begin with the wool felt. What is wool felt? Wool felt is not the craft felt of your elementary school days. It's a more durable and heftier material than craft felt. It's made from wool fibers that have been matted, condensed, and pressed. The origins of wool felt date back to Central Asia thousands of years ago. Mongolian communities used the material to craft clothing and rugs. Modern uses tend to be things like wool hats and slippers, that kind of thing, due to the qualities of warmth and durability. Our application today uses these thinner yet still strong pressed sheets of it that you can find. Where will you find them? If you opt to shop online, you can search Etsy, Amazon, or online fabric and craft stores using the term wool felt in quotes. Always do check, because as you'll learn later, sometimes wool felt and felted wool get all jumbled up in the search algorithm for some reason. For in-person shopping, you can go to your local fabric store or find another source local to you by doing an internet search for wool felt, again in quotes, and check it. Nearest me. So wool felt near me, and you can shop in person. Or you can input your city's name and shop in person. Now, I've used the featherweight interfacing, also sometimes called fusible, to add some structure and substance to the pages. Each of these pages has it in between the pieces of wool felt, because I wanted to add some structure and substance to the pages while still maintaining a softness and flexibility. I wanted the pages to feel good in the hand, yet make them even more durable. Between this and the blanket stitching around the edges, even with a lot of flipping of pages over the years, this could be an heirloom to pass down, I suppose. That's the reasoning behind the featherweight fusible anyway. What is felted wool, you wonder, perhaps? Felted wool is a woven textile. So once the wool is shorn from the sheep and the roving is carded and it's spun into thread and woven into wool cloth, that wool cloth is washed in hot water and dried on high heat, sometimes multiple times. This process turns the wool fabric into felted wool. Once felted, the warp and weft of that original cloth are less visible, sometimes not visible at all, as in the case of this one here. I have others where you can see, and others where you can't. It's shrunk, it's fluffier, the fibers are bound tight due to the shrinkage, and thus there's little risk of any fraying. I'm talking about woven wool here, made from wool thread. Knitted wool is made from yarn, which is much bulkier than thread, and knitting results in a much looser fabric. If you felt a knitted woolen garment or blanket, it will be much more prone to fraying. So woven wool thread-based textiles are best for felted wool applications, this being one of them. Where can you get felted wool then? You can make felted wool, as I mentioned, by taking old woven woolen garments and blankets and washing them in your machine on the highest heat setting. And the agitation of the wash cycle is key to this process, and you rinse them in cold, and then you dry them in your dryer on a high heat setting. You repeat that until you no longer see the warp and weft, or it feels very fluffy and has shrunk significantly. Then you know you've felted your wool fabric. You know, of course, there's an option to purchase felted wool online. You can search felted wool fabric bundles, put that in quotes. It's often sold in bundles of squares or scraps. And be careful, especially with that, because felted wool results often give you a larger mix of wool felt. So this versus this, very different items, but the internet still confuses them quite a lot. So be cautious there. But yeah, you can search, again, just like we did before, felted wool near me, to find some local options. I will put some links for online options. Etsy's a really good one. But as far as local options go, if you have a quilt shop in your area, they can be a good source for in-person shopping. There seems to be some crossover between quilters and wool applique artists. Fiber artists of all sorts gather there, and I'd call ahead to be sure they happen to carry felted wool. To find other local sources, again, a quick search for felted wool fabric near me, in quotes, can do the trick. I get packs like this from my local quilt shop, so they've got nice colors and lots of good selection and texture. Let's talk about the lanolin. Lanolin is a natural wax found in sheep's wool. It's a powerful natural moisturizer used in skincare, cosmetics, and pharmaceuticals. And lanolin is excellent for needles. Its natural oils help lubricate the needles, prevent rust, and they keep them sharp as well. That's the reason I use raw wool in the pin cushions that I create. This is some of that raw wool. A lot of people do use wool in their pin cushions for that reason. The natural lanolin is already present in the natural wool and hasn't been processed out. There's little, if any, lanolin left in wool that's been commercially processed and dyed. Because of this, I chose to relanolize the wool slightly in my needle book. Felted wool applique is a beloved craft. It's a lot of fun. It's super fun. This needle book is a nod to that in a slight way. And so by relanolizing the wool, it's extra functional. Onto the DMC. I've used DMC because I have so many color options in my stash. Feel free to use pearl cotton or specialty threads that coordinate with your book. And have fun with your button choice. It's front and center in your project, so put some thought into how it will fit in with your design. Buttons are so fun. I found my elastic cordage at a local craft supply recycling center. A lot of stretch there. You can likely find it at a craft supply shop, I imagine, or can make your own cordage, or use elastic or what have you. That's it for our supply discussion. Now let's get on to stitching those labels. So in tutorial 1, we went over your needle inventory in depth. And you hopefully come away from that with a list of the needles you own, the needles you plan to own, and some sense of extra pages you'd like to include in your book. In making the labels for this specific book, I used my LaserJet printer to its fullest, printing out my needles list by running my fabric directly through my printer. I'm going to show you how this is easily done, but there are alternatives to this if you do not choose to go this route, and I'll cover those alternatives briefly afterwards. We begin by typing up our list in your favorite word processing software. In this case, I'm using Microsoft Word here. Because we'll be printing out and stitching these letters exactly as you've typed them, you want to include these formatting options in your list. You want to include needle size numbers if you plan to include them in your pages. I did so in my original book, and I've included some here in this example, though I'm not actually going to be using them today because this needle book will be for my daughter and she won't find that very useful. Increase your font size so that it will be both stitchable and readable. For instance, mine defaulted to 8 and you just saw me raise it up to 20. Once you've typed your list, highlight it all and select a font that you like. You don't want to choose one that's difficult to read or once stitched, or a fancy scrolling script might be nice, but might be hard to read, might be less legible once stitched. So pick something clear, and in this case I chose Calibri Light, and I did italicize it to give it a slight slant, so I just preferred that at this time. Then you want to add, as you'll see I'm doing here, additional spaces in between each letter to accommodate the additional thickness that will result from stitching the letters. You don't need to watch me do all that, so I'll skip ahead here, and I'll come back when I've completed this. Okay, so I've got the spaces between all the letters and all the numbers. You also will want to add extra space between each line item in your list because you'll be cutting these out after you've stitched them, and you'll want a nice uniform border of plain fabric around each label. All right. Oops, I went up the page here, so I'm going to shore things up a bit, remembering that I have margins, printer margins. Great. Okay, now we're ready to print this onto our fabric. This is where the freezer paper comes in. Print out a test copy of your list and read through it, checking that things are as they should be. You've got things spelled correctly, all the letters are evenly spaced, and you haven't missed adding any additional spaces anywhere, etc. Check that it's going to look good on a 4x4 piece of wool felt. And then based on the overall size of your printer paper, mine is 8.5 by 11 inches here, for example, I'm going to cut out an identical sized piece of freezer paper and of my label fabric, the sheet or pillowcase that I mentioned during the supply side of this video. Note that if your list spans more than one page, you'll need to cut out multiples of these items. If your list is 2 pages long, for example, you're going to need 2 identical sized freezer paper pieces and 2 identical pieces of your label fabric. If you've not used freezer paper in sewing projects before, let me explain where this is leading. Freezer paper has a light coating of plastic on one side only. This is handy for sewing projects if you need to transfer designs for cutting out complex shapes onto fabric or, as in this case, text. By simply laying your fabric on the waxy side of the freezer paper and ironing over it, you get a light yet workable bond between the two. And in the case of design transfers, whatever you've drawn or printed on the paper-only side of the freezer paper can then be cut out of the fabric you've bonded it to on the other side. It peels away pretty readily afterwards, also with no residue. It's a handy trick. And freezer paper is somewhat transparent, so it makes transferring designs from another source fairly straightforward. In this case, however, we're taking it a different direction. It's not design related. We're going to use this freezer paper to trick our printer into thinking it's paper that we're printing on, whereas we'll get the laser jet to print on the fabric that's on the reverse side. This is maybe sounding more complicated than it is. Let's do the bonding of the fabric to the freezer paper after we get this cut out. Okay, it seems to be the same size as my printer paper. And if I flip this over, I can show you the plastic side. So it's pretty evident which side is plasticized. That's the business side of the paper right there. And now we'll get the fabric cut, and then we'll be all set to create our composite piece of paper. Okay, let's do the bonding of the fabric to the freezer paper. To prepare for that, we're going to place the freezer paper shiny side up. Then we'll place our fabric to cover the shiny plasticized side. And at the same time, we're heating up our iron on the cotton setting. Get that all smooth and ready to go. Okay, so once you've lined up your fabric on your freezer paper pretty well, then put something between it and your iron, just to be on the safe side so you don't get potentially any plastic on your iron. That would be a shame. And go ahead and get that fabric adhered to the freezer paper. Let's see how that did. So let that cool for a second. now it's adhered. It's not loose any longer. So I'm going to go ahead and clean up these little edges where I didn't cut my fabric too horribly well. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to go through the printer. I think that's close enough. Okay, the only step then left is to make extra certain we know which way to place this composite paper into our printer so that the fabric side is what receives the ink. To determine this, we won't put this composite piece we just created into the printer just yet. Instead, we'll write the word up on the top piece of paper that we're going to place in the cartridge on the side that's facing up currently. Again, we'll print out our needle list that we just created in the word processor and check the results. Did the list get printed right over the word up that you wrote on the top piece? If yes, then you'll place your piece or pieces of composite paper fabric side up into your cartridge, because you've learned that the side facing up in your cartridge is the side that gets printed on. If, conversely, the word up that you wrote ended up on the back side of the needle list you just printed, then your printer flips the paper before printing, and so you will want to place your composite paper or paper's fabric side down in your printer cartridge. And by the way, there's no need to remove all the other paper in your cartridge before doing this test. Just place your composite paper on the top of the stack. Depending on your results, do the appropriate placement and print your needle list onto your fabric. Once printed, we'll peel off the freezer paper and we're ready to get stitching. Okay, so I wrote up on one side of a piece of paper. It happened to be the paper that I had the needle names on. And I placed this piece of paper back in my paper stack in the printer with this piece of paper on the top and this word up. And when it ran through and printed out, it printed my needle names on the back. So now I know that the paper that's in my printer cartridge gets turned over before it's printed. So knowing that, I placed the piece of freezer paper that we adhered the fabric to. I placed that in the cartridge with the paper side up, because I knew that and the fabric on the back, so that when it went through the printer and came out this way, the printing would take place on the fabric. And indeed, when it came out, I now have these words printed on my piece of fabric. And now I can peel the fabric from the freezer paper. Now it is simply a piece of fabric with the words printed on it, and of course that will work with pictures or any number of things you can do. And I am now ready to stitch the page headings of my needle book. As you can see, I've opted to go for a pretty high contrast white and black needle heading for each page, and that's fine. I've hooped up the fabric, not cutting it first because it's easier to stitch if you've got the full piece of fabric, and you can hoop it up. This is pretty thin fabric, so it's not kind of conducive to working in your hand necessarily, but that may be something you prefer. I decided to hoop it, and I'm using the back stitch here because I'd like to hug those curves a little better. You can always make smaller back stitches to capture that curve effectively. Think of this as a stitch along rather than a tutorial if you like, as I'll be making a second book along with you. Thinking this is an effective way for me to get all my points across. The full needlebook series playlist is linked below if you'd like to continue stitching together. Don't you just love the sound that the needle and thread make as they're poked through the fabric? I love that. So I promised you alternatives to using the LaserJet printer to get your labels onto your fabric. And so I thought I'd just close that loop by saying that you, of course, can freestyle your script. Just draw it by hand and it'll have a nice personal touch to it. And then simply stitch over your letters, your freehand letters. Another option, of course, would be to use a light box, print out the names of your needles in any font you like on your printer, typewriter, what have you, I suppose. And then use a light box to trace that onto your fabric. And then additionally, if you didn't have a light box and wanted to go that route, the tried and true of writing up or printing out your needle names in the font of your choice and then taping that to a window and then taping your fabric over that and tracing it, basically getting light from outdoors to be your light box. You could additionally do that. So there are plenty of ways you could get your needle names onto your fabric and kind of facilitate your stitching in using whatever font you so desire. So those are options. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Yeah, so I will finish up chenille here, and then I'll do the rest offline, and we'll pick up after this, cutting out the labels into individual 1-inch strips so that you're ready for tutorial number 3 when we come in and start constructing our pages. And we'll have what we need to proceed, because we'll be able to place these needle names right where they belong, front and center of each page. And please forgive, my eyesight is pretty poor, so I recognize I'm coming shy on some of those letters. I have a camera between myself and my sewing, and that puts me just a little further than I'm comfortable from what I'm working on. So as you can see, I've been cutting the names down into 1-inch strips with the needle names actually right in the center of each 1-inch strip. That'll give me the most wiggle room for getting the sizing just right when it comes to putting it on the page. If your strips are an inch, that's not a hard and fast rule. It's going to be much narrower when it goes on the page, so you needn't worry. I'm just giving myself a little extra grace here. The next tutorial will be tutorial number 3, and we'll be jumping right into making the covers of your needlebook. And so that will involve lining, making a pocket out of the front and the back, but before that, doing a little sashiko design work. So look forward to that, and I look forward to meeting up with you again and continuing to progress on this project. I think you're going to really enjoy the end result. Thanks for sticking to the end, and good luck with getting all your labels made and getting all ready for our next step. Take care. Bye-bye.